being filled in Northwest Missouri to come down here and talk to you guys about what's going on in this state, in this country, and what we can do to take it back. And oh, by the way, there are people like me in every corner, tucked into tiny little spaces all over the state and country. Rural Democrats are a thing. So I always like to start off and talk about my run. What possessed me to do this? Because I didn't plan to do this with my life. I was a teacher, a literature teacher for 16 years. And I worked in rural schools, which meant that I never was able to teach just one thing. I had 6 preps when I was in Albany, which is a 4-day week school. But I was finally able to get to Maryville, and I was teaching just juniors all day long. American Lit, my favorite thing. I wanted to be a history teacher, but when I was in college, my advisor said, you're going to be up against all the coaches, teach English. So I did. And she was right. She was right. So I was enjoying my career, my kids, and my grandkids, and my tiny little farm up there. And then in 2018, Missouri passed an abortion ban with no exemptions for rape and incest, and that sort of incensed me. So I called my representative, and he didn't call me back. Now, how many raise your hand if you've ever called your representative and they did not? Well, it looks to be a common occurrence around here. I wonder what's going on, Republican dominance. But so I called him, didn't get a response. I emailed him, texted him, all the things. And then I thought, you know what, I'm just going to start posting about him. And I would at him, and still nothing. But what really sent me over the edge is when he wrote into the Maryville Forum, and he talked about how proud he was to sign that ban. I thought, that's enough. It's enough. So as a teacher in that tiny little town, I wrote a rebuttal to him in the Maryville Forum, and you can imagine how well that came over for me. It wasn't good. But he still didn't contact me. And so I'm sitting at home, and I talked to my husband, Jess, and I said, Jess, call Alan. And he's like, I don't want to call Alan. I said, please. And he did. And then 20 minutes later, my husband got a phone call from my representative. And I said, no, it's not him, it's his legislative aide. He said, nope, it's him. So we told my representative, hey, Jess is the one who's been trying to get hold of me for weeks, so please call her. And he did. I answered the phone. I went in to him because I was so angry, and he told me the 2 things that I will never forget, and the 2 things that I tell everybody that I go to speak to. He told me, Jess, I don't have to talk to you, and I called you out of a favor to your husband. I didn't know what to do with myself. I often say that, I passed out for a while. I don't know what happened. I have no memory of what happened. But you know what? He was telling me the truth. He didn't have to talk to me. He ran unopposed. He didn't have to talk to me. He's a Republican, and he can do whatever he wants in Jeff City with a GOP supermajority. He doesn't have to talk to me. And that's the thing that stuck in my craw. That's the thing that I couldn't stand. But I still couldn't run for office because in Missouri, you can't run for office as a teacher. And so my school reminded me of that fact and said, hey, when are you going to get out of here, right, if you're going to run for office? And so I did. I ran in 22, got my butt kicked, got taken to the woodshed. But here's a couple things I learned. Everybody deserves some sort of representation. Everybody deserves to have someone that will listen to them. Everyone deserves to have someone to call them back and not tell them they don't have to talk to them and be truthful about it, because they didn't. So, long story short, everybody in this state needs a voice. They need a choice. And that's not what we are giving to our people. When I ran in 22, there were 40% of the seats that were uncontested. 40. When I ran in this last session that we just got, where we were recruiting and helping people like Beth with Blue Missouri money, we were able to get it down to 18% were uncontested. So we saw a huge amount of people decide to run. And that's the thing you ought to know, friend. I think it's immoral to ask someone like Beth to run and not fund her. To ask her to stick her neck out and not be behind her. To ask her to give everything up in her community, her friends, her job maybe, and not be behind her. And that's what we're doing in rural spaces all across this state and all across this country. And I talk about rural people because we can take back this country if we just get in touch with rural people. The New Hampshire Institute ran some data, and they said if 3% more rural people would have showed up in 24, Kamala Harris would be our president right now. 3%. And Democrats will look around and say, well, it's okay, we can win these
Missouri, if strategy like just focusing on winnable races was good strategy, Missouri would be blue. But right now, we do not have a Democrat elected statewide. Not one. We are at rock bottom. But the good news is, we hit rock bottom. And now there's only one place to go. And that's up. So I talked today to a woman named Jen Rubin. She was a reporter for the Washington Post for a really long time. She left and started a Substack called The Contrarian. If you're not following it, it's great. She's a great journalist. She likes to talk to me because she's from New York City, and she doesn't think people like me exist. They're always like, wow, you speak so well. We're rural, not stupid, right? But she says, you know, what's going on? What are the farmers saying? And this is one thing I really need to tell you guys. Everyone in rural spaces is not a farmer. In fact, most of us are not farmers. In Missouri, 12% of rural people are farmers. But the Democrats do this. I'll say, what sort of plans do you have for my community? And they'll hand me a piece of paper and it talks about corn and soybeans and fertilizer. And how can I knock doors in rural Missouri when I'm only going to talk about corn and beans and fertilizer? Because they're like, my school is 4 days a week. We don't have any shoulders on the road. The hospitals are gone. The nurses and doctors are leaving. We can't keep the teachers because we pay $35,000 a year. When we want to win, if we want to win, we're going to be real serious about talking to everybody in this state, no matter where they are, even if they're in the sticks. And that's how we're going to come back, friends. I promise you. There is power in what you are doing right now. There are a lot of people gathered here, and people think that everyone in this state is a Trumper, that we're the reason that things are happening, and that's just not true. There are so many of you here showing up. These protests that we just had the other day made a difference. And let me tell you a story about Sam Graves. I can't say too much about him because he lives in my backyard and my husband's a teacher up there, but I'll say a little bit. We had an empty town hall in St. Joseph, which, you know, is a really red place up there. There were 350 people that showed up for that town hall. Because, you know why? Sam hasn't been here 12 years. He has not had, no, it's longer than that. My math is bad. I was an English teacher. He hasn't been here since 2012, not had a town hall at all. So we invited him to this town hall. And his legislative aide said, well, he'll be in Washington. All right, I mean, fair enough, right? Except he wasn't. I was listening to farm radio that morning, and guess who was in St. Joseph, Missouri? Sam Graves was in St. Joe on the same day, and I thought, well, that's a coincidence. That's weird. So anyway, we reached out, hey, he's here, and they're like, nope, he's on his way back to Washington. Okay, fair. So we go ahead with what we had planned, and I'm speaking, and somebody comes behind me and said, Sam's here. And I was like, well, I hadn't seen him. They said he's over there at the door. And I look at the door, there's a smaller man. And a hat, glasses, and a yellow surgical mask. It's Sam. This boy knew him from Tarkio. He knew that it was him. Sam showed up. And this is what I know. This is how I know we're making a difference. Because these empty town halls, these are his constituents. These are people showing up to people who haven't been receptive to us for a long time. You're not just a regular protester. You're not a random person standing outside with a sign. You're not a random person just calling his office. You're his constituents, and he knows he's in trouble. And that's why when we have someone running like this, we owe him to get behind him and stand behind the people who are running, because Sam is running scared. 24 years later, I mean, it took a long time, but Sam is running scared, and we can do it, friends. We can do that. Today, this afternoon, the SAVE Act was sent through the House. It was voted through. 4 Democrats voted for the SAVE Act. That is an act that will disenfranchise tens of millions of people, especially people like me. My original name was not Piper. It is now. My birth certificate does not say Piper. The only way I'm going to be able to vote if they get this through the Senate is to go and get a passport. Friends, you know how much a passport costs? $130, $140. You know what that's called? but every woman in here who has changed her name is going to be facing that if it gets through the Senate. Today, they voted to gut $880 billion from Medicaid. Today, this afternoon, that's going to go through the Senate too. They are coming after everything. And I sounded like a crazy person 10 years ago when I was telling people what they were going to do. But the reason I knew it was coming is because I'm from rural America. Because I saw what they did to my community, and they're going to take it nationwide. And if you don't believe me, read Project 2025. They lined it all the way out for us. They have hollowed out rural America. They made sure that we had no infrastructure for rural small farmers. They sold land to corporations that could pollute our air and our water with impunity. They did these things on purpose. It was a fire sale. That is what is happening right now. What do you think is going on with the stock market? This is purposeful. A couple minutes before he decided to reverse those tariffs, he told his people what? Now's a good time to buy. This is in front of our face. Every single one of us should recognize it, and your Republican friends should too. And that's why I've got MAGA family. I've got MAGA, okay, they're not friends anymore, but they are acquaintances, right? I mean, if racism and sexism is not, something that you could, if you could just overlook it and still vote for Trump, I got a problem with you, right? But I got my mom, and she's MAGA, and she's got real quiet. She's real quiet, where she used to be real loud, right? She told me something. I called her and I said, I'm upset, I'm a little worried about your Social Security. She said, don't worry, Jessie. I've got a 401k. About that, right? About that. I was able to go from poverty to a graduate degree with public school teachers, and Pell Grants. And these are the things that they're taking away. You know why? Because they don't want people like me, and they don't want people like you. Born and raised as a Southern Baptist, I was always indoctrinated. I went to college thinking the Bible was the first book ever written. I got there and I was like, Gilgamesh? Wait, what? Everything unravels, right? This Christian nationalism that they are pushing is not Christianity, right, friends? It's something much worse than that. It's something where they want the boys to learn to take, lower pay and worse wages, and where women will absolutely be submitting to young men. That's a big part of Christianity. If you want to know what Trump and Musk are doing, all you have to do is look at places like mine. People will often tell me when I go into other spaces, y'all get what you vote for. I couldn't vote for one Democrat in this last election in a county seat. Not one Democrat was running for a county position. How do I get what I vote for? I had no one to vote for. My state representative ran unopposed again. These things keep happening. We have to tell the Democrats to come back. They left. You know what? The Republicans did too. No one knocks on my door. No one calls me. But you know who's doing the business of politics in my area? The churches. There's 480 people in my town, and there's 4 churches, and 2 of them will preach politics from the pulpit. St. Joe, Missouri, a couple of days ago, right before the school board election on Tuesday, there's this church called Grace Calvary Chapel, and their pastor stood up, and he said, now I'm probably getting into an area I shouldn't be talking about. This may be against our tax-exempt status, but I want you to know, parishioners, you need to vote for Tim Miller. Said the name, said he knew what he was doing was wrong, but he did it anyway. You know why? Because he don't get in trouble. Because nothing happens. And I turn these people in once a week. I know exactly what to do. I go right to the IRS. It doesn't faze them because nothing happens. And to be honest, I'm going to tell you that they're probably not going to do anything about it now. They've probably already taken away that department. We need 180,000 signatures in this state to put abortion on the ballot. We have 380,000 signatures in this state. What are the Republicans doing right now? They're writing a bill to put it back on the ballot to and get us to vote away our rights. And you know they do it because they do it with Clean Missouri. We already saw what they did. We voted for it. It was anti-gerrymandering. They patted us on the head and told us we didn't know what we were voting for and put it back on the ballot the next year. And they put ballot candy on there, made people confused, and they won. And that's what they're going to do with abortion. What happened to sick pay? What happened to minimum wage? We needed 180,000 signatures. We got it. We passed it. What did they do? They put it to a vote, and they took away that right in the House. The Republicans don't care about you, but you know what? They don't care about anyone. That's including those Republicans who stand up for them all the time. In Missouri, 50th in teacher pay, 49th in educational funding, 33% of our schools are on a 4-day week. There is no one coming to this state if they don't have a school to send their kids to. My kids are not coming back to our little farm. I got one that lives in Overland Park. I got one that lives in Kansas City. Well, they probably got more stuff to do in those places, but other than petting a donkey and picking up eggs. But I got another movement to Omaha. The thing is, they're not coming back because our schools are 4 days a week and because you cannot find daycare. This is what we talk about when we say brain drain. There's nowhere for these kids to go. We've lived under the same supermajority for 22 years. A couple years ago, we had some bad scores after COVID, you know. And the first thing these Republicans did was find a mic and stand in front of it and say, see, we told you, public schools in Missouri are no good. These teachers in Missouri are no good. Here's what I got to say. Who's been in charge of education for 22 years, friends? Who was that? That is the Republicans. The one thing I need you to, and it's turning 50 do a thing too. That's, I don't know, it's a lot. But the one thing I know that we need to say for sure and to tell our friends about is the Department of Education, why we needed it. And I had a conversation with a lady in the Phoenix airport, and I didn't know her politics, and I was in no mood to sit down and visit with the Trumper. But she was talking to me, and I was like, okay, sort of filling it out. She started talking about the Department of Education, and I said, well, they dismantled it, and that's not good. And she said, well, here's what I think. I'm kind of proud of it, because they're going to send that money back to the states to support the schools. Friends, do not give a dime to Missouri legislators and expect them to fund the schools because they're not going to do it. But what did the Department of Education do? Make sure that there was no discrimination. Or if there was discrimination, they were the ones who brought suit. They made sure that girls had sports to play. They made sure that schools got 10% of their budget from the Department of Education. So you have some schools here. You've got Liberty, you've got Park Hill, you've probably got some schools that can absorb 10%. But North Nottoway can't. You know, all these schools in Burlington Junction can't. Tarkio can't. We already have been forced to pay teachers $40,000 a year, which they should be paid way more than that. But when you defund the schools, they can't find the money to pay those teachers $40,000 a year. Now what are they going to do when 10% is gone? This is tragic, and this is purposeful, and this is how I know. Linda McMahon is bad. I mean, the WWE princess, she's bad news for education. But I tell you who was worse. That was Betsy DeVos. I gave you time to boo. That woman was asking, because she's, you know, voucher queen. We can give you 20 vouchers. What's it mean? The closest school's 56 miles one way. It doesn't matter. So they were asking her about vouchers in rural areas, and she said, "What this?" Well, I imagine that kids on the farm can get some headphones, go out into the field with gray clothes. Listen to gray clothes right now. She said when they're done with that, they can find a John Deere dealership and get an apprenticeship and learn to work on tractors. Because that's all rural people do, is work on tractors, right? And then if they're done with that, they go home and hire a private tutor to take care of their kids' schooling. The thing she did say is that rural kids don't deserve brick and mortar schools. But she might as well have said it. She might as well have said that kids like mine don't deserve anything. They deserve to be in the fields. And by golly, they might be in the fields, because what are we doing with immigration right now, right? There's a reason they're rolling back child labor laws at the same time they're rolling back education. It's purposeful. Florida just passed a law saying that kids 14 years old can work overnight in factories. You go to places like Iowa, and there are children, the children of immigrants, who are the worst part of watching all of this is seeing the completely unqualified people stripping our nation of critical funding, from infrastructure to museums, from libraries to schools, from health organizations to Social Security to Medicare to Medicaid. They want it all to fail. This state has terrible roads. Up in the 6th District, where you guys are, and all the way up to me, we are the worst roads in the entire country. What do they not fail? What do they fail to put forward every single year? If you need a tractor, if you need a combine in my part of the world, you're going to be in trouble because there is nowhere for you to go. There are people that are killed with farm accidents all the time because of our roads. You guys pay $700 more every single year because of our roads. Our hospitals, underneath the GOP supermajority, 19 rural hospitals have closed, and he was right to tell you about 90 minutes over there in Marceline. I had to drive an hour for a pregnancy that I wanted, to deliver a pregnancy that I wanted. If there was something bad that happened to me, I would have been in trouble, right? And that's St. Joe. If something really bad happened, I'm going to have to be life-flighted somewhere else. When we close these hospitals, you've got women, grandmas and grandpas sleeping in their cars in KU parking lot because there is nowhere for them to go, and they can't afford a hotel for a week's stay. That's what it looks like when you defund hospitals and when you take away Medicare and Medicaid. I want to tell you something. Every time I go and talk to people that aren't from this part of the world, they'll say to me something like, "Why don't you be less aggressive?" They'll say, why don't you be a little more moderate? Because that doesn't win anything, friends. You know what they say when they want us to be moderate? They want us to throw trans kids out, right? That's what they mean. They don't want us to stand with the LGBTQ community. They don't want us to stand with public schools. They don't want us to say the things that need to be said, but this is what they need to know about people in Missouri. We're progressive. And if you don't believe it, we've got legalized weed. What do you think that is, right? We have an abortion ban and legalized weed. We need that right to work. We expanded Medicaid. We've done these things because this state is not red, but it is uncontested. All right. I was trying to go for applause there. It's uncontested. Because I do speak on the coast, and people are always like, "Oh my God!" Like I said, she can speak. She does. I got up and spoke in D.C. a couple years ago. I sat down and I was sitting next to a nun from New Jersey, and she said, "Why don't you move?" And I said, "People ask me that all the time, but it's usually not a nun. It's usually a Republican. Like, get out of here." Where am I going to move? They rolled over us to get to the entire country. We tried to say, you don't want what's going on here. It used to be good, and now it's bad, and now it's taken over the whole country. After the election in November, I woke up panicked. I couldn't believe this happened again. I could not believe it happened again. And I thought, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to put some money in my pocket. I'm going to go to Minnesota. I love that place. I'm going to go to Minnesota, and I'm going to buy some land, and I'm going to stay in Missouri, but if I need to run, I know how to canoe. I will be on the boundary waters, and I can get to Canada. And then in Canada, I'd be like, hell no. You ain't coming in here, lady. But as I was looking around for land, I realized there was no reason to run. There was MAGA stuff everywhere. There was Trump stuff everywhere. I turned on the radio and they're talking about Elon Musk and what he's going to do for this country. There's nowhere to run. So we stand and fight. And we join arms, and we stand up together and say the things that need to be said. And don't be moderate, be aggressive. Say the things that need to be said, because we can do better than this. Thank you, guys.